way she handled the absentee ballot, at minimum, absentee ballot policy. What she asked clerks to do in being flexible and not considering signatures on absentee ballots. Fortunately, a court in the state, long after the election, slapped her for that. If we have a constitution that says only authority for elections in this state is the legislature, then that's how it ought to be. The Secretary of State, however well-intentioned because of COVID and all the upheaval on that, can't simply go off and decide we're going to mail out thousands of absentee ballot applications and not go through the normal process of the local clerks doing that under request by individuals themselves for the application. We saw problems all across this district of the numbers of people that received multiple applications in the mail, and people received applications for people who no longer lived at that house. That's not the way to run an election. I never want to see a 2020 election again. I don't think any of you do either. And so while I've been called a seditionist and other things for using my constitutional responsibility and authority to express concern about electors in certain states, that was my responsibility. And we never got to the bottom of it. And so we're doing everything in our power at the federal level. And the state, we've seen the state legislature attempt to do it, even though the governors vetoed the bills that they put forward to make our elections safe, secure, and accessible for everybody. And make it more difficult for people to cheat. That sounds okay, doesn't it? So, whose question was that? That was yours, okay.
My second part of the first question was knowing what you know today. If there were 50, 60, I'm not sure exactly how many lawsuits that were filed objecting to the results in several of these states, none of which were ever found to have any real foundation. How would you vote today? Knowing what you know.
I vote the same way.
I respect
I vote the same way because, as far as I know, and somebody correct me, in all of those lawsuits, there were no evidentiary hearings given.
That there weren't, as far as I know. I mean, we're all, but why? Why would every single judge that this thing went in front of?
Two reasons.
Okay.
Philosophy, if you look at our state Supreme Court, it's a political court. It's no...
This is federal. Yeah. I'm talking about across the United States.
Yeah, but I'm giving an example of what I said. It's philosophy. We're not going to get a hearing in our state Supreme Court. The second reason was absolutely atrocious filings in some cases. Even in, I know one that Giuliani filed in Arizona, had the wrong state in verbiage in that filing. So there were some shoddy applications and shoddy work done on it. That doesn't diminish the need for people's concerns to be addressed about it. And right now we still have a major split in this country of people who feel, right, wrong, or indifferent, that the elections were not done with honesty. And to have courts out of hand dismiss without even holding evidentiary hearings, regardless of the bad filing, I don't see serves anybody's best interest.
One quick follow-up.
Okay.
A number of those judges were appointed by President Trump when they got to the federal district courts, the appeals court. Mm-hmm. When they got to the Supreme Court, and they were all dismissed. I mean,
the Supreme Court refused to hear it.
Right, by an 8-1 vote.
Yeah. The suit that came from Texas concerning Secretary of State and the absentee ballot system, that I signed on an amicus brief. And again, amicus brief, make it very clear, that is simply saying, we believe you ought to hear this case. It doesn't say that I agreed with the case or not. I happen to agree with the case, but it didn't say that. It says we asked the court to take this up because of the necessity to deal with the situation at the very least, to deal with the perception at the very least that there are illegalities taking place. For the Supreme Court to not take that up, the most consequential issue in our country, that being legal voting rights and responsibilities, was just absurd.
Three of those justices were appointed by the sitting president.
It's just absurd. It's absurd still. If you want, as a Supreme Court justice, to let our country devolve into what it became, then shame on you. Rule against it. Rule that the Texas was wrong. Fine. But to let it remain hanging because they were chicken to do what I have to do every day in taking a vote on the record, and they have a lifetime appointment, I'll never forgive them for it. Sorry to be so emotional. Next question.
This is from Jen in Ann Arbor. Is there any legislation in place addressing the issue of money following the students? Especially, I have an interest in special education funds.
Money following the student to any school of choice? There's a lot of discussion. I'm a member of the School Choice Caucus. I sit on the House Education and Labor Committee. I believe that students are all different, and students learn best where they learn best. Whether that's public, private, parochial, home, alternative school, whatever. Online, offline. I believe we ought to, as a country, if we believe that education is so vital. The Northwest Ordinance, which had a statement in it that became part of our state constitution, Article 8, Section 1. Religion, morality, knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind. Schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. I mean, that's a broad statement. Schools and the means of education. That offers a whole realm of choice opportunities. And we ought to do that. I don't want to take away needed dollars from the swing school system. I don't want to take away needed dollars for a student to be educated to the best of their abilities. And for those of us that have resources to make those choices and pay out of our pocket somewhere or other, or take a loan to do that, it just doesn't seem right that there are others that don't have that choice because of the financial setting, because the dollars stay in the place, the district, where the student is, regardless of whether that student isn't in the best spot to be educated. So no, I think we ought to expand and talk about that more and more, and we're finding as a result, at least so far, things wane after time, and the intensity lessens. But because of COVID and students being left out of the classroom and sent home, and parents seeing what was being taught or not taught, sadly, in many cases, some of those parents have said, nuts, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to find a means to educate my kids better than what I saw during the COVID crisis, and having a chance to watch the online instruction that was going. And let me quickly to state that not every teacher teaches well online. I talked to a lot of public school teachers and others who said, I need a kid fix. I want to be back in the classroom. I get that. But parents also saw, I have to find something that works better for my kids. And I applaud them for that.
I'm Diane from Saline. What can you tell us about Pelosi wanting to replace the currency of the US dollar?
Ma'am, could you turn the mic on? I have a hard time.
Yeah. I'm sorry. This is from Diana Saline. What can you tell us about Pelosi wanting to replace the currency of the US dollar?
I haven't heard that yet. I think she wants to destroy the US dollar with her policies. Inflation, it's a tax on everyone. And it's going up and up. And right now, I just read this morning from the ranking member on the Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, that all of the indications are moving toward recession. And that's not good. Only one that thinks that's good is Jimmy Carter, who will now be seen in history as not the worst president that we ever had. No, I don't know. Whose question was that? Yes, ma'am.
She's buried in bills that are going before the U.S. Congress to replace it with a digital dollar. And when they transfer the U.S. dollar into these digital dollars, we're going to lose big time.
Okay, I haven't seen her putting language in those bills, though I know that there are.
Oh yeah, she's buried it in those bills. That's why you guys get those bills that are, 600 to 1,000 pages long, because there's no way you can read them before you got to vote on them. Somebody ought to do something about the length of a bill, so that you can literally read them and understand.
Put the Republicans back in majority again, because we did away with those bills. During our 6 years in majority, we did away with bills that had multiple subjects, and we mandated, except for the appropriations bills, we mandated it be single issue bills, and that helps. But no, I don't know Pelosi doing that, but I know there are members of Congress on the Democrat side that are pushing for digital currency, and they've offered legislation out in the open to do that. So far, none of that has passed yet. And again, COVID has given the opportunity for those type of discussions to be looked at more positively than in times past, because we've done so much at the government's behest. And that was a nice term. At the government's mandate, online and virtual, which now has allowed citizens to become more comfortable with doing things like that and not thinking through the security of digital, who would control it, and then who ultimately can cancel anyone for political purposes who's taken the wrong stance. Perfect example. Look at Canada with the truckers. That's exactly the concern about having something digital and not something that you can hold in your hand, even though, as you and I know, it's not backed up by gold. When Trudeau can go on and say, because you're causing a problem to us, in speaking for freedom, and simply saying it makes no sense to have these mandates, we're going to whack you in your bank accounts, we're going to restrict you, we're going to shut you down. So that's a concern, but I don't think it's necessarily Nancy Pelosi. You know, I can push back on Nancy all I like to, but I want to do it when I know exactly what she's done. But I know Democrat colleagues have been putting that forward. So.
This is from James from Saline, and Judy, this is a very similar question to what you just gave me. It says, what are you doing as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee to prevent our children from bearing the brunt of the devastating effects of climate change?
Well, that's, again, why I said that I joined the Conservative Climate Caucus, which is brand new. Our trip to Belgium and Rotterdam and Stockholm and North was for that purpose. That was the first one we've done. Because we want to be at the table. And we want to push back on things just because. What we saw in Europe, they're 10 years ahead of us on the Green Deal. They call it the Green Deal. AOC here calls it the Green New Deal. But it's all the same thing. It's restricting the ability of us to have resources that can be useful to moving us forward without restrictions from outside. And to do it in a way that all people will have to bow down and do it. No questions asked. And you see numerous things taking place now with environment, social, and governmental evaluations of business and industry, of media, of tech, and of individuals that ought to cause a lot of us concern, because it moves away from the sovereignty of a nation, and more importantly, a sovereignty of an individual citizen. In this country, who is the government? And I'm representative of the government, which is the individual citizen. So my effort is to say, what can we do to get better in our environmental response to deal with climate in such a way for those that don't see any major climate concern, and others see that as the existential #1 threat to the entire world and everybody in between. How can we, as America has generally done, still succeed, build upon, grow, offer more opportunities and freedom, and still do things in the best way possible, environmentally and otherwise? You know, it's part of my record that I began my education when I left high school, went to university. I was majoring in forestry. I take no back seat to anybody in wanting a clean environment. But I don't want to destroy my country over cleanliness of environment that goes way beyond what's rational and what's real. And so what is that? And that's where I think we say to the fossil fuel industry, you're under the gun. If you want to survive, and we want you to, because we still appreciate some of the petroleum industry, the fabrics and the plastics, the containers that we have, and the artificial joints that we have, and the heart valves, we still like that. And so if you want to be part of the energy policy as well, let's do some research, find a better way. You know, I think they're capable of it. Let's push that. Let's say to the solar people, let's find a way of being more efficient. Let's find a way of doing it without taking good farmland out of the ground. But more importantly, increasing the cost to lease farmland by all of the farmers surrounding the solar field. And I'm not even talking about whether you think it's ugly or not. I'm talking about the practical aspects of it. Or the wind turbines. Is there a better way we can do that? People are talking about painting one of the blades black now, and that allegedly will keep the birds from flying into it. Good, let's do that, if that's the case. If we can do small modular nuclear reactors that don't have the cataclysmic potential that the large reactors that we have now, and can be placed at the necessary spots to add to our grid and do even better than turbine and solar. Let's do that. If we can put a dam back in place and use it for hydropower, that's what I'm speaking for in Energy and Commerce Committee, and that's what my Republican colleagues are speaking for. From the West Coast, with our ranking member, and I think soon to be our chair, Kathy Morse Rogers, Washington State, with huge hydropower out there and the capabilities of that. And it's frustrated daily that we leave that off the table. So that's I guess my answer. I want an all-of-the-above energy plan that works best, that continues growing our environmental success, and also does things to get other countries to do that, not like the Paris Climate Accord, which didn't do anything. It whacked the United States and countries that are doing their best right now, and left China till 2030 to just come up with an idea. Same with India. And then you think of the African continent. Sure, they can use solar over there. Do they have the resources to do it? Do they have the infrastructure to use it? But good old natural gas is what brought us to the point we are now. And we'll see what we can do better in the future.
This is from Paula in Manchester. Is there going to be a national electronic vaccine passport established? Is the U.S. going to sign with the WHO to negate our Constitution the next time a pandemic rolls around?
The World Health Organization is a danger to the sovereignty of this nation. I will fight tooth and tongue to make sure we don't have a passport like that. Forgive me for the graphic statement I'm going to make here. My staff is going, oh no, he's coming off the rail. My nose was sodomized 10 times in 12 days. In going from nation to nation. The prayer breakfast at the Capitol before that, when there was meeting with the president before he came and spoke. Requirements to have that test. And then ultimately to show my vaccine card at ports of entry at the various countries. I was so glad to get to Sweden. We got on Scandinavian Airlines, and you heard the announcement. We encourage our guests, our customers, to wear their masks. And it was as if the Swedes there in the airport said, whatever. Got on the plane. Some people wore masks. Most people didn't. The flight attendants didn't wear masks. And the test that I had subsequent coming back from Sweden to get into Rotterdam or get into Frankfurt, it all started again. Masks everywhere, tests, vaccine cards, all of the rest. No, I will not support us joining any setting or coalition that would require mandatory vaccine electronic mandates.
Thank you.
It's time. It's time. Listen, this is endemic. I've had COVID. Thankfully, I didn't have it bad. My wife didn't either. We did it at the same time, so we could both be sick together. And I wish she wouldn't have to supply all the chicken soup to me. I could do it for her as well. I know people who have gotten very sick. I know people who've died. But I also know people who've died from the flu, from cancer, and from all sorts of other things. And yet we go on with life ultimately. I think we should have spent 2 months after COVID first came out, 2 months, to get it down that this is something you ought to be worried about. And you ought to take necessary action. But it's up to you. And now we found out that even the vaccine doesn't keep you from getting it or getting it. And we found out that most masks that we all wear generally keep us from getting the cold more than it is from getting COVID, because we're not spraying in each other's faces. But other than that, the science hasn't shown what initially Fauci and others were saying, and then changed. And I like to think as Americans, we can think for ourselves, at least most of us, and the others we can help. Was that your question?
Well, I did want to know.
We're just going to questions first that were put in here,
Okay.
and then we'll come.
Okay. Well, this is a comment. A year ago, I moved out of Ann Arbor. You have reached out to me more times in the last year than 30 years living in a Democratic rural district. Thank you. And then this one, do you support U.S. forces to reject Russia out of Ukraine?
No, I not on the ground in Ukraine. Again, they're not European Union country until I think just this last week, when technically I think European Union invited them in. They're not NATO. An agreement with NATO nations that President Trump thankfully took the NATO nations to task and saying, doggone it, you guys signed on as a group, a coalition to defend against Russia aggression. And you said that you would pay a certain percentage of your GDP into NATO, and you aren't doing it. Well, that beefed up more and more who paid in. And now we're looking at maybe Sweden and Finland coming into NATO. If Putin attacks a NATO country, then I think that's the only time that I would agree to our forces going in. Because the requirement of NATO is if Russia aggresses, attacks, we defend together. And that would be the purpose. But right now, doing what we've done in sanctions, doing what we've done even as today, sending more military equipment in, munitions, doing cyber issues, I have no problem with that. I think that's the only thing that's appropriate right now. Before this weekend is out, I will have had a Zoom with Ukrainian parliamentarians that I know well. And look forward to seeing them again, though I have a concern that I may never see them again. But we'll have a conversation before the weekend is out on Zoom and we'll know a little bit better. But
I heard you on Steve Gruber this morning. Welcome back from Hague, Belgium, Finland. That area scares me. Home of Davos World Economic Forum. Goal, eliminate private property by 2030. Klaus Schwab. There are grassroots to outlaw World Econ Forum initiatives. Do you support?
sounds like whoever wrote that has read The Great Reset. Like some smiles out here, some of you read that too. I hear Schwab and others. I don't support that. No, absolutely. I support America's sovereignty. I support all countries' sovereignty. I don't want a world global union that tells us what to do. I guess that's probably as succinct as I can be. Can I finish the questions? Just you can drive me faster the next meeting. How many more do we have?
I have two.
Okay.
As a board trustee at Saline area schools, I'm interested in what is being done to support public education, inclusive curriculum, social emotional needs, other important issues.
That's up to the state legislature and the state board of education. It's not a federal responsibility. We've given so much money on COVID relief, allegedly COVID relief to the states, much of which was supposed to go to schools. I know there are academic institutions in this district right now, K-12 to higher ed, that have more money than they know what to do with. To give some flexibility to that through the state legislature so it can be used for the purposes most necessary in those institutions, that's fine with me. But the federal government ought to stay out of public education, private education, home education, parochial education. That's a responsibility at most of the state legislature.
And then this is Judy's question. Climate change has created fires, flood storms that cause destruction and massive spending from states and federal government. Do you feel we are doing all we can to address climate change nationally and in the state of Michigan?
I think we're doing an awful lot. And I think the fact that we have reduced greenhouse gas initiatives as part of the federal government, greater than the next 12 nations combined, developed nations combined. It says we've come a long way. We could do the entire Green New Deal, everything in it, and it wouldn't change to any noticeability our atmosphere here in this country and our water in this country. That's why I say we have to take concern about India. And India, China, and others are doing things we did with the Industrial Revolution. And then we got it right. We began to clean up and do it more environmentally sound. And I think we'll continue to do that. But to hamper us, hamstring us any further for climate, when in fact there is a lot of disagreement. There's not total agreement on climate in the academic, in the scientific community that's out there. And you just have to come to some of our hearings in Washington to see that there's not an agreement on whether or not it's a problem that many people talk about. But should we do better? Sure. And that's where I think we have an all-of-the-above energy plan that will help and still provide us opportunity for success. You had a question. But that was it? Okay. I've got to finish now. So school agreed to our hour here. I've gone 5 minutes over. And while I enjoy it, my staff gets very concerned that we don't get the next meeting. But we'll look forward to doing it again. And probably some of you have been on our tele-town halls. I like this town hall better than tele-town hall, although we talk to more people on tele-town hall than not. But thank you for taking the time to come out today.